Hello, welcome. Starting a little bit early here, just to let people trickle in. Just for those who are coming in, I'll say hello. My name is Nathan, or Bardic Punk on TikTok. This is my March live calling Spring Repair as opposed to Spring Break. A little bit to celebrate the beginning of spring, so happy spring to you all. We're a little bit late for the official start date, but it's still within the right week. I learned a couple of interesting things actually while I was reading up on the time frame and what might be going on around the 25th of March. One of the interesting things, especially in light of the recent discussion of daylight savings time, that there's the bill going through to eradicate it, to remove daylight savings time in the US. So we'll get back an hour or lose the hour we would have gained or something like that. But if you look back, there was a changeover at one point way back in history between the Julian and Gregorian calendar. I didn't know if you knew this, but under the old calendar, March the 25th was New Year's Day, or it would be April 5th under the new calendar, technically. So when the calendars changed over, there were not only a number of days lost, but also the new year shifted to January 1st. That means that in the places that changed over those calendars, one year started on March 25th and ended on December 31st. So there was actually an entirely shortened year. And when they adjusted the calendars, again, depending on the country and what calendar they've been using, they lost anywhere from 10 to 15 days right away. So we're complaining about 1 hour one way or another. Imagine if you lost 10 days or 11 days. There's even a famous painting with the subtitle, "Give us back our 11 days." People were just as mad back then as they are now. So I thought that was fascinating. Spring always throws me back into order. That's why I called it Spring Repair. Seasonal affective problems, So I hope for the rest of you who have the same issues, this increased sunlight is helping you feel a lot better. It's nice for it to be daylight at 7 o'clock. Now they're promising us possibly rain and snow this weekend, so it's not quite spring up here in the northeast corner of the U.S., northwest corner of Pennsylvania, but we're getting there. We're starting to get some 60-degree, almost 70-degree days, so that's great. The other thing that was interesting, for those who don't know, who haven't seen my Hermes devotional rites, I sometimes practice and try to learn a bit of Greek. Well, it's Greek Independence Day. It celebrates their freedom and independence as a nation from the Ottoman Empire. Back, was it 1829, I believe, Greece got its independence. So, hey, happy Independence Day if anybody's watching or is of Hellenic origins. Eleftheria ή thanatos, freedom or death. If you didn't know also, that's the basis for why there are 9 lines in the Greek flag. That's the 9 syllables. Eleftheria ή thanatos. So, fun facts for the day as we come up to 7 o'clock. Oh yeah, interesting side note on that. Greece got its independence when they were helped by Britain, France, and Russia. Now, Russia was probably in it to weaken the Ottoman Empire by taking away one of its countries, but hey, we got Greece out of the deal. All right, what I have planned for today's live. It's been a little while. The last time I did a live was back in January. Skipped over it in February because I was a little sick and not able to come on, not able to speak or think as well as I'd like. But that means I have lots of material stored up. So I'm doing one today. The next live I definitely have planned is another Hermes devotional rite on the 4th of May. May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. But it's also what some celebrate as Hermes' birthday. That is May for his mother, Maya. Comes from May, comes from Maya. And the 4th because that is Hermes' sacred number. It's when I always do my devotional rites is the 4th of each month. So there's a live plan for Hermes' birthday party on the 4th of May. Now, I may do one sometime in April We'll see. But there's certainly plenty to present. For those who are new, just coming by, what do I normally do on these lives? Present material, new things, old things that don't fit on TikTok, things that I think are seasonal or appropriate or that you might like. I did one for Halloween. Got most of the way through it before people got too scared to continue. Somebody did anyway. For today, what I have planned, first, a poem, which you'll get a sneak preview of one that'll get posted later to TikTok, but you get to hear it first for coming here live. A song, the entire thing, which I'm only going to post a couple verses of on TikTok. See, the first poem is called Amputation by Proxy. Hopefully it won't scare people too badly. The song is called The Rich Man Richer. And then 2 longer form poems, again, longer than normally fit on TikTok. One that was going to be in a book publication called Thorny Dark, which unfortunately the book will not get published. And then another longer one, brand new, called Definite Article. That's the one that's the longest of the poems for tonight. After that, the other brand new thing, we just recently got the print copies for a book that I helped to write. Maybe backward on your screen. Guardian Fighters Era. It is a light novel, heavily illustrated novel. It is originally created and story created by Darren Samsonith, who then contracted me to do the writing of the text, and it is illustrated by one Socrates Mota. So, collaboration brought together by our mutual employer. I'm very proud of this work. It's what I've been working on off and on for at least 5 years. Delayed heavily by the pandemic and by the artist not being available for a while. But it is complete. It is on sale on Amazon. That's the little bit of capitalism I'll do for today. And I'm going to read a chapter from it. Darren gave the go-ahead, and I wanted to share with all of you to give you an idea of what the book is about. It also happens to be, I think, my favorite chapter from the book. So, that's what I'm planning for today. I know some people came in and out, so welcome to those who arrived. Goodbye to those who left. And if there's additional time, if I'm not too far past 8 at that point, I have one other story. I'll wait and see on that. I might save it for the next live. All right. So the first poem, as I promised, is one that'll be posted later on TikTok, but you, for being here, get the sneak preview. It's called Amputation by Proxy. And content warning, there are some indirect references to violence and self-harm, used as a metaphor, not as a direct reference. So, beware the cruel who want you cutting pieces off yourself. Of course, avoid the ghouls who want to chop you up themselves. But just as bad, and far less honest, proxy torturers will try to tell you bits are bad and better off removed. Your hair, your weight, your words, your voice, the color of your skin, your thoughts, your needs, your love, your choice, the will you hold within. They'll jeer and blame, cajole and shame, repeating, cut it off. They promise you'll do better if you just do what you're told. While some believe they're trying to cure, just trying to be kind. Others know they're doing harm with dark desires in mind. There's those who'd see you crippled, whittled down to fit a box, so they can carry you around and use you as they want. Either way, they want your hand to reach for saw or blade and cut away those hated parts, assuming all the blame, so they can claim there was no crime, for their hands are unstained, if later you come charging, filled with agony and rage. There's those who like you full and whole, with all your parts included, and their advice should be heard too and given greater weighting. But even they don't matter half as much as what you choose. If you decide all by yourself what you think needs removed, then that's your choice for you to bear, no matter who says what. Restraint before you start to cut. Some parts, once severed, may not be so easily replaced, so I would close consider and be on guard for someone saying what they think you should carve, no matter if they stand by your side or coach you from afar. Ask yourself, will this removal really suit my benefit, or does this person want it gone to suit some other purpose. It's called Amputation by Proxy. Going back, I saw something about dating, living with mature men in America. Well, my wife is certainly living with a mature man. Physically, anyway. My pronouns are he, him. I am a cisgender male. And a couple, mine. You're correct. That's my wolf. A couple of comments I don't really understand. So, let's get past those. I've learned from previous lives that comments that just don't make any sense, I really don't need to read them aloud. I apologize if you do make sense and I just don't get it. But at one point somebody asked me what my favorite race was, and it's like, do I know Wilma? That sounds like a D's Nuts joke. If not, I apologize. No, I can't think of anybody named Wilma that I know, sorry. All right. Again, appreciate the likes. Appreciate folks coming in. Oh, I see we've got a bigger crowd now. Yay. Okay. So for you, just coming in, you did miss the sneak preview, but that poem, Amputation by Proxy, will be posted on my TikTok later. Do I like Fortnite? I've never got to play it. It looks interesting from what I've seen. I'm very bad at Battle Royale style games. There was a magic-based one I gave a try, and I went, nope. This is for people with better reaction times than me. But I like it in concept. I'm glad people are enjoying very much. Of course, isn't the new deal like Apex Legends? That one's a bit of a personal question. Anyway, swinging. Let's continue on. I wanted to do the song I have fairly early while my voice is still good, with the caveat that I am not specifically a singer nor a musician. I am, however, a lyricist. Yes, there's the D's Nuts joke. Here I thought I was biased by spending too much time on Twitch. No. The song is called The Rich Men Richer. And songs like these are the reason I call myself Bardic Punk. You'll get it. But let's just say, for those who don't know the deal, this is satire. This song is for the billionaires, to show you all how much I care, and maybe even millionaires. Anyone with cash to spare. Bravely take up arms and fight to make the rich men richer. Labor hard through day and night to make the rich men richer. Save and starve and sacrifice to make the rich men richer. And give up all your so-called rights to make the rich men richer. We'll make the rich men richer in the hopes that they will share. Perhaps when they are rich enough, they'll find some care to spare. We'll make the rich men richer with our loyalty and love. For someday when we are the rich, that love would be for us. We'll give away our public lands to make the rich men richer. Put everything in private hands to make the rich men richer. Bow down to corporate demands to make the rich men richer. We most already wear their brands to make the rich men richer. We'll make the rich men richer, since it's what we've always done. Our ways of life could fall apart if we don't carry on. If rich men can't get richer, how would we record success? With dollar signs we measure out who's brightest and who's best. Come join the stock investment game to make the rich men richer. You'll never win if you don't play and make the rich men richer. A few must lose so some can gain to make the rich men richer. Though some get paid for every trade and make the rich men richer. We'll make the rich men richer since they own the things we need. The capital for business loans, our mortgages and deeds. We'll make the rich men richer while we build and feed and breed. With every new transaction they make sure to take their piece. Serve your time in retail hell to make the rich men richer. Sell your mind and sell your health to make the rich men richer. Buy some toys, distract yourself, and make the rich men richer. Create all kinds of techno wealth to make the rich men richer. We'll make the rich men richer, never dreaming of release. If we took back what they hold now, then we would be the thieves. We'll make the rich men richer, staying happy on our knees. Because we're told that poor lives grant riches when we leave. Okay, some more useless comments. Still, you contribute. As they say, there's no bad comments except for the racist, hateful, sexist, violent. Yeah, silly ones are fine. Thank you again for those who've come in. And the likes, I appreciate it. Like I say, I do my best to give that the proper robustness. And the first and last verse I will post on TikTok. I'm not doing the whole thing because it runs into about 3 minutes long. But hope you enjoyed. That's definitely the style of my writing and music there. The next poem I have to share, it's called Thorny Dark. And as I mentioned, this was originally submitted several years ago for an anthology of poems and stories about spiritual encounters, times that you've encountered something beyond the human. In my case, this would be more of a animate spirit, animism. So you'll hear the theme as I go on, but you're kind of getting a first chance because I've held this back and not presented on any social media or in any other writings because it was being considered. Unfortunately, the anthology is not going to be published because of financial difficulties and not enough submissions. That happens a lot in self-publishing, I'm afraid. But again, the poem is called Thorny Dark. A lone youth in a uniform, through brambled hedges walking home, walks back to camp through paths grown dim, wielding light against the gloam. Shadowed thorns reach out for him. His light holds back the mocking night, holds long enough to walk halfway, but dies before escaping fright. Once bright blades cut back the thorns, and torchlight held the crawling gloom. But brightness fails, the darkness loosed, and clouds hold back the stars and moon. He tells himself he's halfway home, halfway safe and not in need. The night is warm, his eyes are strong, and thorny stings hurt more than bleed. But darkness comes and presses close as brambled fingers reach toward life. Shadow tongues lick tender skin and laugh at his small light and knife. His eyes are weak, his claws are blunt, his skin as thin as any leaf. He carries fire like a toy and stolen shards, pathetic thief. Run, costumed boy! Run, weak-eyed boy! Run from the thorns, the teeth and claws. Run from the dark, run through the dark. Run to the thorns and teeth and claws. But in that dark lives something else, with wiser ears and nose and feet, ignoring darkness, dodging thorns, chewing stems with its sharp teeth. Give to me, boy, your shining toys, and give me all your hoarded food. Then trust my lead through thorny dark, and I will guide you safe and true. The lone youth in the uniform gives up his light and all his food, refusing only one small blade, no toy but rather sharpened tooth. Well enough, and answered well. Here's your path to home and night. Sleep safe tonight from creeping dark, remembering who led you right. And visit mine when you find time. The dark and I will always be here, right where we met tonight. We'll have more fun, you, it, and me. That is a true story, within certain limits of true, about when I first met Rat, animal spirit, and has been a helper of mine ever since. The uniform, the way it's said in the poem, makes it sound ambiguous, like it might be a military uniform. It was in fact a Boy Scout uniform. And I really did get lost in the dark without a flashlight in a thorn maze. As to the voices, well, you can guess or decide for yourself whether those really existed and said what I think they said. It was definitely intimidating. And clearly I got out of it alive. All right. I see we've lost a few, maybe gained a few. Hello. Thank you for the likes in between. The next thing I have planned for tonight is the last of the poems, but it's the longest. So this one is called Definite Article. And I don't often work in prose. You'll notice if you've heard my TikTok videos that I'm almost always using rhymed metered verse, almost a kind of lyric form of one kind or another. Occasionally I'll do free verse, and very rarely on occasion I'll do longer free verse. There's still a bit of structure, which I think you'll hear, but this was a departure from my usual style. I hope you enjoy. It's called Definite Article. You are writing your story right now. In the book of your life, this line says, I was listening to a very strange poem. That is, if this part is mentioned at all, and not skipped past or summarized. There should be more important parts further on, but maybe, just perhaps, this is an important part of your story. As I wrote this, it became part of me, part of my story, written in time, even if I erased this poem later on. But I didn't I? And you're hearing this. You chose to tune in and listen. Thank you. And now these words are in your book. First, thank you for including them. Second, take a moment to listen closer. It isn't just this moment that endures, nor this one, nor this one, nor this. Sorry, I'm a thief of your time. I can't help stealing a few moments more. But here's a trade, a useful truth in return for the space that I've claimed. Every choice, every act, everything you do becomes part of your story. Nothing is ever unwritten or lost. Even if each mind erases the memory, every moment is critical, etched into this ongoing story of your life. You will have millions of moments, though some will have fewer or more, and the weight of better written parts may outweigh some unfortunate acts. But there are also singular scenes that stand out no matter what we pile against their guilty gravity. Try not to despair, knowing how important is everything you do. Try not to freeze, inactive from fear, when you consider that perpetuity. And most of all, don't forget this. Don't let your finite, fearful mind hide away pretending ignorance of this awful, painful, hopeful burden. Take this as a glorious challenge, to insert meaning into your story, to write something some reader, perhaps an abstraction or fiction, but perhaps not, just maybe not, your reader will appreciate later. This is equally as true and useful, even if your story to this point has been unconscious, graceless, and unwanted. Now you know. Now you begin the first word of the first line of the first paragraph of the newest volume in your ongoing story, a story you are consciously writing. And if you are at the last line, then make it a brilliant one worth slogging through a whole miserable, senseless, ill-writ tale, just for one amazing punchline. Now that we have that resolved, here's the second, even harder part. All of this is true for everyone. Every creature you will ever meet is writing their story, and though few of them know the importance of their every action, they feel it. Many do consider themselves the protagonist, the focused character in some greater dramatic epic. They are not wrong, nor are you, should you choose to be important if you make your story a heroic one. The problem is forgetting this, that the same is true for everyone. We are all lead actors, all writers, all the creators of living volumes. And the more ways that you can create scenes with multiple heroes, where everyone gets a grand part, where they all stand out shining, the more acceptable your script will be to everyone involved. This is as true for 1 million actors as it is for 1,000 or 2. True, You can become written into those other stories in other ways, by intruding, by playing antagonist, by causing widespread change, destruction as much as creation, or with simple explosive nonsense. Comments. But then your part is set, and what a mess you've made of yourself. On that note, this is the final gift I have to share in return for my stolen place in your book. Your story need not end upon death. There does not need to be the end when the book closes, read and done, shelved, and unread forevermore. Not solely, you hearing this now is proof. Not solely literal words survive, but also fame and the impacts and the ripples of your writing, all the loved ones you recorded, all the stories where you guested, all the readers who viewed your drafts. The trouble is, once you're gone, you're not the author anymore. Others will continue writing you, for better or worse, for true or false. What will they use as their basis? They will use what you wrote. Your own story, the first edition, the true story, the autobiography. And after that come the biographies, and the hagiographies, and the libels too. But they will all have to reference something, and that something is your work, the lines you are writing right now, and every moment that follows, until your pen stops. So go. You've spent enough time with me in this trickle of thoughts. If this all means anything, let it mean that this was the point after which you started writing a little bit better, feeling your meaning more keenly. For now, you're letting me fill in this part, as you hear the words in this poem. But in everything you do, everything you choose, you are writing a story you cannot erase. Right now, right in this moment, you are writing the tale of your life. It's called Definite Article. And if you wonder, do I feel that way all the time? Yes. It's not good for anxiety, but it is good for making sure your life has meaning. Hi, thanks for the likes. Thanks for coming in. Finished up the poetry part of the time. It's now time for some storytelling. As I mentioned before at the start of the live, the first thing I'm going to be reading is a chapter from this book, which I don't know if you can see. I think I'm down in this corner and it's probably reversed. But it's by Darren Sonsoneth, who is the creator of the setting, the story, told us where it would go. Myself, as writer, who actually created the words and the tale as it's spelled out. And then Socrates Moda, who did the illustrations. There's over 100 illustrations in this book. Again, I'm not trying to market and sell too much, but I am very proud of our collective project. And so it's set up in the style of a light novel. Every few pages, there's a full-page illustration. Sometimes in a comic format with multiple panels, looking more like a manga. Sometimes it's a single panel, large illustration. In fact, I'll show you the first one as we get started. What I'm reading is well into the book. It's chapter 24. I chose this chapter because it's very illustrative of the world, kind of the setting, and one of the most important characters. Let's see if I can get this close enough that you can see. So the fellow in the fur hood is Turlock, who is, let's say, one of the alternate protagonists in the book. As you'll hear, he's not the nicest of people, but he is very well-meaning, very heroic in his own way. And he is entering the city of Hanuman in the country of Gaisan. And this at the bottom is an arena, a fighting pit. Very briefly, Guardian Fighters era is about a time and a place where warfare has been abolished, or at least suppressed. There's a ruling council that enforces the world's creed, the Guardian Code. Specifically, all disputes between nations and between localities are resolved by champions. The most skilled fighters face off one-on-one, and the winner's country gets whatever they've wagered for, whether it's territory, resources, anything that falls within the laws of the code. So, with that in mind, notice I'm being a little vague about where and when this actually is. But that's the setting. All right, chapter 24. And I'll pause periodically. I found during the readings they can be a little bit long, so I'll pause occasionally, especially if there are comments or questions. But I'll try to keep going as continuous as I can. Turlock descended to the undercity of Hanuman, tasting bittersweet nostalgia dissolved in sewage. The familiar maze of tunnels, sewers, basements, trash pits, and war wreckage still felt like home, even if its layout had shifted many times since his escape. Certain landmarks never changed, even if their boundaries grew, shrank, or relocated entirely. Shifty Artis's casino could survive even the poorest years, its tables and tokens easily relocated to a new home. The Black Fair always reformed somewhere, no matter how often the police raided that illicit marketplace. The House of Sighs could always rely on customers seeking out its pleasures wherever it hid. And of course, no matter what hole they occupied, the fighting pits merged all the attractions of those other three enterprises: thrills, money, and flesh. These trades were the established businesses of the Undercity, but equally as enduring were the independent entrepreneurs, the tutors who would teach you vigilance at the cost of your coin, and traders who would exchange your life for your possessions. Turlock did not expect trouble from ordinary thugs. His hulking build and hard look sent scavengers looking for easier prey. His rugged dress suggested he was used to dealing with worthier predators, the beasts found beyond a city's protections. He wore a bear's skin as a cloak, its claws worked into a clasp and its jaw sewn into the hood. If anyone asked, yes, he had killed the bear himself. In the northern fringe, one did not wear a trophy they had not earned. Despite his feral appearance, Turlock was deeply familiar with urban life. His knowledge of the fighting pits was particularly intimate. His brutal victories in the pits had kept him fed and strong when his fellows struggled. Some of his peers starved to death in childhood. Others sickened and died of preventable diseases, too poor to afford even basic medicine. Still others had joined gangs and died in their endless wars for turf. A few lived, but damaged in body, mind, and spirit. Turlock wasn't the sole survivor of his neighborhood, but he was the only one who had truly escaped. He doubted any of the wretches he'd left behind would recognize him now, but just in case he kept his cloak wrapped tight and its fanged hood pulled low. Bands of the same bear's fur edged his boots and gloves. Its remaining teeth and claws hung around his neck as an amulet. With his leathery tan and rough beard, he looked every inch the wild man. Only a neatly tailored leather jacket with wool trim, worn beneath the bearskin, suggested that he wasn't a simple, poor savage. The jacket and his thick trousers were concessions to the bitter cold outdoors. Turlock might have been living in the frigid north for years, hunting bear and learning nature's wisdom with the wise ones, but he still felt the chill like any city native. Walking through the sludgy halls of the Undercity, he warmed up and opened his jacket. It was an amusing irony that the lower levels of Hanuman benefited from the trapped heat of the city above, and the Undercity also brought its own warmth from fermenting garbage and sewage. Turlock tried not to think too hard of the foul vapors created by that decay. The wild lands might be freezing cold and full of beasts, but they were much healthier than any city, particularly the slums. Why would any sane man return to such filth? Turlock wasn't sure he was sane. His plans certainly sounded mad, but what was the greater insanity? To allow evil to fester or to fight back, no matter the odds, in the hope of saving his homeland. Turlock had chosen the latter path. He could only hope others would agree that his struggle was worthwhile. He had hoped others would join him sooner, or that he would find a revolution already in progress. Surely other Geisonians saw that their nation's survival required drastic change. But no such luck so far. Only a few loyal souls had even yet endorsed his crusade, and fewer still joined directly. To be fair, he hadn't discussed his plans with too many people yet. He wanted to carefully consider any potential allies. For example, anyone comfortable within Gaesan's sickness wouldn't be interested in curing its disease. Anyone too eager to join a revolt could be an informant. If Turlock spoke the wrong words to the wrong person, he would be flagged as a troublemaker and targeted for persecution. His dreams would end rapidly if he were captured, slain, or hounded back to the fringe. Some people were willing to fight alongside him, but they were too weak to trust. Such underlings would be useless to his plans, or worse, a vulnerability. Turlock needed allies who were motivated, loyal, and capable. His closest lieutenants, Quinjana and Toadfellow, were both powerful, useful, and deeply hostile to the lords of Gaesan, each for their own reasons. They were also both permanent outsiders, a criminal and a reshape, and therefore unlikely to turn traitor, having nothing to gain from betraying their fellow enemy of the lords. Turlock had no trouble using such outlaws, shaping their actions and abilities into the tools to craft a better future. After all, he had once been a serial murderer himself, even if he was forced into that role for survival. Since his escape from Hanuman and his twisted past, Turlock had discovered he possessed a talent for leadership. Despite coming to the fringes as a refugee, he'd won over the Wild Ones with his persistence, strength, and willingness to learn. Perhaps his experience working the crowds in an arena and appeasing his superiors in the gang had translated into political savvy and charisma. Before he decided to leave and return to civilization, he'd considered contending for tribal leadership. Turlock was sure he would find more help in time. Each ally he added would persuade others to join, either through their own appeals or by inspiring greater confidence in their leader and a potential for success. Such recruiting was Turlock's sole reason for risking this return to Hanuman. The city held 100 dangers, the majority of which were lurking in its belly. Turlock knew he was equal to all but the worst physical threats, but violence was only one sort of hazard. He needed to be subtle. Being revealed too soon, even in the downtrodden Undercity, would be fatal to his plans. He had to be alert and wise. Being snared in civilized traps like temptation, or sentiment, or despair would slow him down and weaken his resolve. Perhaps the Wild Ones were right. Perhaps the cities themselves were the problem. Turlock had planned to give his adopted family a voice in the government to come. Together, they might even dismantle Gaesan's cities, rebuilding this nation on the model of the small tribal village. Likely not, though. Other nations were managing urban civilization without so much attendant depravity. Foundry and Ironvale, Boulder and Zymetria, and even the mighty Metacity were flawed, true, but they demonstrated strength and health, not decay. Gaesan might need cities to compete against those rivals, not to mention needing the population to run those industries. Gaesan needed businesses, but productive businesses that actually profited their workers, rather than exploiters that fed only the nobility and the politicians. As it was, Gaesan was a joke, a victim of its own evils and of an international system that permitted those evils to fester. The World Council was, at best, responsible by neglect, and at worst, certain counselors might even be enabling the cruelty and selfishness of Gaesan's rulers, benefiting from the nation's weakness and the exploitation of its people. One step at a time. The world's greater troubles might be a matter for Turlock's descendants to solve. He would be content just to begin the process of redeeming Gaesan. But before beginning even that small task, Turlock needed more power. The lords would never step aside unless there was no alternative except surrender. A peaceful transition was a nice thought, but bloody revolution was much more likely. Turlock did not shy from the violent struggle, but he wanted to make sure he was ready. He wanted to be certain that he would win that final battle. How appropriate that his revolution might begin in the domain where he had once fought for survival. Turlock could smell the melting pit before he spotted its entrance. The venue's central feature, a vat of flesh-melting acid, emitted fumes not much more pungent than the surrounding stench, but noticeably more sour. The acid pit lent its name to the club's owners, the Acid Gang. Hanuman's oldest gang and one of the strongest crime families in Gaesan, possibly the strongest gang. The Melting Pit was also the wealthiest and most long-lasting of the nation's illegal fighting clubs. Turlock needed influence like the Acid Gang. His best chance at success was to get a big, rich, connected group on his side to fund his operations. Since any legitimate organization would owe its existence to the Lords, a criminal gang was his last best remaining option. Turlock also chose to start with the Acid Gang, in particular, because of their mutual history. He wondered if anyone there would still remember him, much less recognize him. "I am Turlock. I have an appointment." As an introduction, it wasn't formal or grand. The direct statement was best. Simple words suggested simplicity of mind, and whether that meant honesty or stupidity, either option was less threatening than cleverness. Turlock's initial approach to the gang had been simple. He sent a courier with a brief introductory letter. "I have a business proposal, a plan that will gain you profit and power. When might I speak with your leader?" The courier came back with a price and a date. Turlock agreed to both. He had just enough lease saved to cover the cost of an audience. He'd earned money from his hunts and stolen more from loggers trespassing in the fringe. All of that coined together bought him a few minutes of the gang's attention. His words would have to buy him more. He'd need to be especially persuasive to earn their alliance. Arriving at the Melting Pit, Turlock spoke first to the Fight Master, one of the few employees present when the pit was closed. The Master was also likely to be a ranking member of the Acid Gang. He was a gnarled goblin of a man in a leather vest, with thick burns scarring his neck, possibly the result of drug manufacturing, but more likely spatter from the acid pit. A deliberately seared skull and bones pattern shone at the base of his twisted throat, a mark of his devotion to the gang. "Appointment? For what? You scheduled a fight?" "No, I want no fight, in or out of the ring. A business appointment with the owner. I am the one with the business proposal. I was promised an audience with your leader today." Turlock kept his words vague, mindful of the few drunken thugs who lounged about the club's bar. "That's you? I wasn't expecting a wild man. What's this business about? You got captive animals to fight?" "I will only explain the specifics in private, to someone of rank. If he chooses to allow others there, I do not mind, but I would rather not speak so openly. I promise you my offer is worth his time." Despite his disdain, the gangster paused in thought as Turlock finished. "All right. I'll check with the boss, but if you're wasting his time, you'll pay for it. Maybe in my pit." Turlock caught the jab. The leader of the Acid Gang was not a him, but a her. A woman now? Interesting. He'd never heard of any criminal organization, in Hanuman or elsewhere in Gaesan, being led by a woman. She must be a strong newcomer, able to maneuver and murder her way to the top. The Fight Master led Turlock across the central floor of the club, the concrete base of an enormous, ancient cylindrical chamber that housed the Melting Pit. Welded metal stairs and walkways created 3 tiers above the main floor. The upper walls were also punctured with holes, fenced with chain link, openings onto side rooms, viewing space for additional spectators. They walked back to a heavy security door, a metal slab welded onto a barrier of layered scrap. The organizer's key opened the door's lock and let them pass to a back hallway, where a shaky stairwell brought them up to the pit's uppermost viewing deck. Turlock could hear customers entering far below. Between its isolation and the growing noise of the entering spectators, the balcony ought to be a reasonably private place to conduct business. "Wait here. I'll send the boss." Turlock stepped into the observation room, watching the arena below through a mesh grating. How many times it had been him in the ring, poised over the pit and fighting for his life, while someone else sat in this very room watching his struggles and profiting from his victories. He fought down his resentment. Anger at the past served no purpose in the present. No matter their history together, he needed the Acid Gang now. Turlock eased his irritation with the thought that, this time, he would be the one benefiting from their labor. He wouldn't explain their partnership that way, of course. Besides, it sounded like there was a new leader in charge since his gladiator days. He couldn't hold his past mistreatments against her personally. The door swung open again and a woman entered, but she was no newcomer, not by any measure. Her sharp, thin face was wrapped in papery, spotted, wrinkled skin with little flesh left beneath. Equally skeletal fingers reached from the folds of her elaborate fur wrap, 2 digits holding a fuming cigarette. She tapped into the room in simple, hard-soled shoes, her legs sticks beneath leather pants. Somehow, her frail frame supported a fortune in gold and silver jewelry, rings, earrings, and a thick chain dangling a golden skull. Thick silver hair had been bound into submission at the back of her scalp. She looked something like a young fashionable matron of Hanyaman, if she had been mummified after death and buried in her full dress. The fight organizer slipped in behind the crone. "This is the man, Queen. Says he has an appointment." Seemed serious. "I figured if you're not happy, I can use him downstairs." The Queen eyed Turlock up and down. "He's meaty enough to be a fighter. A brawny bear. Either that or you could skin him and he'd serve for the night's meal." She smiled, a hint of her past beauty sneaking through her shrunken features. Turlock bore the taunting with quiet dignity. He knew the routine. They would test him, studying his reactions to look for weaknesses. Was he easy to anger? Would he show fear? They sought an advantage. They wanted his measure to decide whether he was useful. Even if they did decide to ally with him, a weak start would mean Turlock was the junior partner, not the leader. He won the first round by saying nothing. "You can go," the Queen ordered her minion. "Get the next match going. I see some fat sheep today." "Oh, I'll fleece them," the organizer laughed. "Have fun skinning your bear." He scrambled back out of the room. They could hear his footsteps banging down the stairs. Turlock waited longer until the Queen grew bored of studying him. She toddled over to a large chair set facing the viewing window. "Come, sit, talk. You bought a few minutes of my time. Let's hear what you think is worth hearing." Turlock took another of the thrones, the large seats in the front row. Similar, lesser chairs were scattered around the viewing area, additional seating for favored guests. Next illustration. Turlock and the Acid Queen. The Queen of the Acid Gang. Guests of the Queen. Was that title a new affectation? Who was this new leader? Turlock wondered if the woman had been a member of the Acid Gang through his fighting years. Did she recognize him? Did she remember him? How much had changed since he left? He opened truthfully, but without detail. "I am organizing a political operation to change the balance of power in Gaisan." Her eyebrows folded new wrinkles into her forehead. "Huh? You don't look like a politician." "I am not, but I have allies in the government, and in the fringe. I have other friends in the cities. Personally, I have strength enough to defeat the Guardian Or. But before I act, I want more allies. It does no good to strengthen the nation. It does no good to change the nation if we cannot build permanently to prevent Gaisan from returning to decay." "I admit you have me interested, if only by your ambition. Before we touch on your qualifications to undertake such a grand project, tell me, why are you planning a coup? Do you want to be in charge? Are you seeking money and power? Or do you represent some other leader or faction, or even another nation intent on enslaving Gaisan?" "I act to save the future of Gaisan, for its people," Turlock intoned. "I grew up seeing the worst of its horrors. They call your gang criminals, but worse criminals rule us, executing hundreds of each year, imprisoning thousands, and robbing and poisoning the entire country. I want to change that system and make our land a place we can be proud of again." The Queen squinted at him, leaning closer, exhaling a cloud of foul smoke. "What makes you think the whole world's not equally corrupt? Maybe Gaeson's weakness has nothing to do with its government and everything to do with its poor location. I don't think any nation is better than us. Some of them are just richer, and they dress up their nastiness a bit better. At least we know how awful our leaders are. We don't lie about it to ourselves or sing songs to their supposed virtues, like Metacity does. So the people are poor. The poor people are also awful. Personally, I think this environment breeds sickness. The citizens are born hungry and stupid and lazy, and most of them stay that way. Now, if you were talking about a way to make money, maybe offering me a share of that scheme, I might be interested. There's money in politics, but none at all in helping the people. You think you can help the people of Gaeson? You'd have to change the people first. Can you do that? Most of them will accept whatever they can get, whether it's a coin or a kick. They keep coming in the doors here, don't they? Night after night. If nobody came to these pits, if nobody enjoyed seeing men melted down to their bones, if nobody wanted to risk their coin on bad bets, I'd be a pauper. But they do come, and they keep coming. They follow their basest needs, and they obey the orders of anyone who offers a treat or threatens a beating. At their heart, I think every one of the people of Gaeson is as nasty as those people you want to unseat. Are you really any better? Well, then blessings on you, wild man. But even if you're so noble, you're still a fool. Voice is hard to do for an extended period. She stubbed out the cigarette and immediately reached into the bodice of her shirt for another stick. She lit it while watching Turlock's reaction, sideways. He scowled back. Her mockery echoed too many of his own thoughts. Perhaps she was right, but assuming the worst was an early defeat, Turlock had to hope that given a chance, Gaeson's citizens would rise to the opportunity to redeem their country. At the least, a change would give the country some time to grow before the next stagnant regime took power again. He answered her directly from his thoughts. You may be right. We may succeed and yet only replace one corrupt structure with another. At least we try. At least we know those currently in power are awful. I have ample proof of that, with more evidence to come. And even if you are evil, even if I am, at least we would be the monsters in power. You could be queen of the entire underworld, not just one gang. Or you might discover something better in yourself and lead Gaeson to greatness. I say it is worth the effort. Worth it? You've done a cost-benefit analysis, have you? You might not have noticed, but I'm not going to be around much longer. All the more reason to risk. Don't interrupt me, boy! The queen flicked her ashes toward Turlock. He resisted the urge to beat out the hot embers that landed in his cloak's fur. You came here asking for an audience with me, so you listen. I'm not about to risk everything I've built over decades for some barbarian with dreams of purification. You're braver than most of your kind, I'll grant you, coming here. But you're full of the same shit about the glories of nature and the evils of civilization. Leave that crap in the woods, where it belongs. If you have something specific to offer, a payment to earn, or a territory to claim, make your pitch, but don't give me nonsense about a revolution. I don't want change. I built an empire on this present state of affairs, and going against that state might win me something, but it's much more likely to lose me everything. I don't have the time to waste on a war to find out which it's going to be. Turlock wondered if she was really so complacent or if she was pretending to be apathetic out of fear that he was an agent of the secret police. But after a moment's thought, he couldn't imagine this woman being afraid of anyone or anything. She probably was content with her petty kingdom. She was exactly the kind of pathetic tyrant he hated and was fighting against. This queen wasn't any new leader of the acid gang, he decided. From the way she talked, she had probably been running the show from the beginning, hiding behind the man who had pretended to be boss. Maybe he had thought he was. Turlock and his handlers had never known who the real leader was. Turlock guessed that the queen was eventually revealed when her last figurehead had finally died, or maybe she just got tired of pretending in her old age and wanted to finally rule in person. Turlock's expression darkened as he recognized her true person. As the noise from the arena rose in anticipation of the coming fight, his voice grew louder. I may be a barbarian, but you are a scavenger, content to sit atop the refuse of a rotting city. No, the corpse of a dying country. Do you have no dreams? No hope for more? No desire to leave something better behind? I am a wild creature, true, but I think I have more love for humanity than all you civilized criminals. The queen's eyes became dark slits. Pathetic. I'm not sure whether to pity your madness or have you beaten for your insolence. Either way, get out of here. I'll decide on your way downstairs whether you get to leave the building or go in the pit. Turlock stood. You cannot threaten me. I am greater than all your subjects put together, and I do not boast. I know my power. I have defeated every fighter I ever faced, most of them in this pit. His revelation caught the queen's attention, and her eyes widened as she looked at Turlock anew. Wait, are you that Turlock? The melting pit champion? You ran off ages ago. You didn't have that beard before, I think. I admit I wasn't paying much attention to you brutes at the time. We all figured you'd turned coward. What is this, some plot for revenge? Were you trying to lead the acid gang to its destruction? Turlock scoffed. I do not threaten you nor your gang, not personally. Instead, I tell you this. If you do not join me, others will. Help me, and your gang will be part of the new Gaeson. Refuse me and be excluded. Think on your choice. Do you want proof that I can do as I say? I will provide it. I am not making idle promises. The queen's anger returned. As Turlock had feared, the woman would not back down once challenged. Gang leaders rarely allowed room for doubt, even in private. If you don't leave, I can remove you myself. I don't need help to deal with a shabby has-been. The queen snarled. She gestured with her cigarette, pointing to the arena below. At first, Turlock wasn't sure what she was doing. Despite her boasting, was she signaling someone to come up and help her? He readied himself for a brawl. Then he noticed her concentration and heard sounds from below. Surprise, panic, and the wet bursting of bubbles. The pool of acid that gave the arena and its owners their names was roiling. Fumes rose from the surface of the murky liquid to spiral upward. The toxic mist not only rose, it curled and curved through the air, flowing in a specific direction, toward the ceiling, toward the private box, toward Turlock. He paused a moment, considering his options. He could probably survive even this deadly surprise, but attacking the gang's leader was no good. Not only would he not persuade her with violence, he would create more opposition. From all the evidence, she would be a dangerous enemy if he left her beaten but alive, and if he killed her, the acid gang wouldn't rest until he was dead, or they all were. Affecting the elements at a distance was an amazing feat of ki projection. Turlock guessed her ability had to do with controlling air to transport vaporized substances. She could move acid, and probably smoke, maybe other poisons. Even her breath could be deadly. No doubt, she was an accomplished ki user. She might have founded the entire gang and built the melting pit just to maximize the use of her specific ki art. However, if she relied on that ability as her threat, Turlock could pull out her prop. And he sorely wanted to right then. The woman might remember him by name, but she'd clearly never discovered, or else had forgotten, his greatest ki ability, his shackles. He could negate her ki, binding and cutting it off. Her control would vanish along with her access to life energy. Unless she had enough ki stored to sustain her own life, he could kill her with the art alone. And seeing that power in action might impress her. He was tempted to do it just to see the shock on her face. He didn't even need to really hurt her, just suppress her power and cancel her threat, returning them to a stalemate. Would she be willing to listen if he did overpower her? No. For one reason, removing the strength without actually attacking her would make her even angrier, and after that kind of humiliation, she would stop at nothing to make sure he died. For another reason, if the queen didn't know about Turlock's supreme art, then it remained his useful secret. Showing it off would only waste a gambit for future use. Although, even if she did remember its nature, Turlock's ability hadn't been nearly so strong in his pit fighting days. Back then, he could only slightly weaken opponents' ki, not fully disrupt their arts or stop their hearts. He had no reason to reveal his true, mature might. Not even his closest allies were aware how deep Turlock's talents ran, and the Queen certainly didn't deserve that knowledge. Instead, Turlock decided to reduce his losses and leave. Leaving, after all, was the wisest choice for any visitor of the melting pit. Gamblers ought to leave while they still had money. The fighters ought to leave before they died and were melted down. Turlock himself had nearly waited too long to leave, escaping only hours before his own manager set him up for a fall. Quite literally, a fatal fall into the acid. The acid gang's starfighter had become too certain a bet, and the bookies found they could make more money on his death than on his continued survival. Turlock was no coward, but he had fled for practical reasons, not moral ones. Running away then had been a matter of survival. Running again today was a sacrifice for the survival of his cause. He gave the Queen a pitying glance, saying, "Very well, you decline. That choice is a setback for my plans, but an even greater loss for you. I will continue my work with or without the gang. You will have to watch my success from the outside." He turned away, walking as slowly as he dared toward the door. The creeping fumes were already starting to burn his throat. She had to be immune to the acid vapors. Maybe all those cigarettes had lined her lungs with protective tar. "I'll be fine," spat the Queen. "You won't. I don't even need to end you myself. Your own stupidity is going to get you killed. Or maybe I'll turn a profit off it. I wonder what the Lord of Hanuman will pay for information about a rebel conspiracy." Turlock did not rise to the taunt. He doubted she would follow through on that threat. He walked out of the room, down the stairs, and across the floor of the arena. The Queen had inadvertently cleared his way out, as the guests and gangsters had fled to escape the boiling acid. Turlock walked onto the street unopposed, furious with himself as much as with the gang leader. Could he have handled that conversation better? Would a different approach, maybe more subtle or cynical, have gained the Queen's favor? Or would she have refused him no matter how he spoke? Turlock was disappointed, but not defeated. Having the acid gang on his side would have sped the progress of his plans, and lacking them slowed his timescale. Hopefully they would not actively resist him. But either way, their absence only made matters more difficult, not impossible. There were other gangs, even within Hanuman itself. Turlock had hinted at those options, but stopped short of any specifics. No need to tell the Queen outright that he would turn to her rivals for aid. No need to remind her that her competitors' gains would be her losses. The second largest operation in Hanuman was the Greed Kings. They were weaker than the Acid Gang in most ways. Less territory, fewer business fronts, weaker fighters, and less infiltration of the government. They did, however, hold greater financial influence and assets. They often purchased or rented the things they needed, but lacked. In time, they might become enough of a threat to warrant the Acid Gang's attention. With Turlock's help, the Greed Kings would improve much more rapidly and surpass their rivals. As one immediate asset, Turlock could add himself and his allies to the gang's resources. Turlock could train the king's foot soldiers. Once their leadership recognized his experience and skill, their organization would benefit further. And if Toadfellow's masquerade succeeded, the conspirators could offer the kings cash and government influence. The more Turlock thought about it, the more the alternative appealed to him. The Greed Kings would take longer to mold into his army, but they would be more his army than the Acid Gang ever would have been. Turlock had more to offer the kings: ascendancy over rivals, power over Gaisan, and yes, more money. But better than money, Turlock could tempt them with the means to earn still more as the rulers of Gaisan. In the Greed King's creed, wealth was status. Turlock could offer them all of the Lord's hoarded riches. He could offer them the coffers of a whole country, not to pillage until empty, but simply to skim from as the economy grew. Once the old lords were gone, these new kings would learn how to harvest more gently, or otherwise Turlock would harvest them in turn. He himself had no care for personal wealth or power. Though he was only adopted by the wild exiles of the Fringe, Turlock shared their disdain for money. While he loathed the thought of working with criminals who named themselves after their own worst vice, greed, they were no worse than the vicious Acid Gang and their horrible queen. It wasn't simple greed that had caused the gang to torture a young man until he had agreed to kill other people publicly to save his own life. They had profited from Turlock's corruption, true, but there were other easier ways to make money. To serve up pain and death for entertainment took a certain twisted cruelty. To revel with it, with pride in your very name. Ugh. As he stalked through the putrid streets of Hanuman's undercity, Turlock shuddered with revulsion. And this time, his disgust had nothing to do with the sewage on his boots, or the carrion he passed in the tunnels. That's chapter 24 of Guardian Fighters Era, The New Disciples, the first book in the Guardian Fighters Era series. I'm working on editing the second book now. It's already written. And after that, we'll work on the third. It's likely to be a 4 or 5 book series. Again, all light novels. I hope you enjoyed those that stuck around and were listening. That is my personal favorite chapter out of the first book because it's an interesting character and a tight scene. A great deal of the rest of the book is one-on-one combat. It's martial arts, action. We describe it as a martial arts fantasy set in a post-apocalyptic future. We had one reviewer who only got an excerpt ask us, why are there some names that are so similar to names on Earth like Hanuman or Old Canada? Because they are those places. All right, it is past 8, so I think I am going to save that last story. If anybody is on and has a request, I have my file next to me. Anything that I've printed out, I can certainly pull back up and read, poems, songs, etc. So I'll wait for a few minutes more to see if there are any requests. But I think I will save the other story for a future live. And it looks like nobody asked any questions. At least not any sensible ones. Don't get me wrong. I like a bit of nonsense, but when it's just repetitive, it's like people quoting Monty Python. They call it memes now, but it's just the Holy Grail lines over and over and over, and South Park lines over and over. You know, that's what we did before there was an internet, before there were memes, is just repeat things from commonly shared media. Same thing. Old man yells at internet. Film at 11. No, actually, I'll yell at the internet more on some future TikTok videos. I've got one, it's called Hey Hey Internet in the past. And there's a future one that I'm really happy with. It's the reason that I found the stuff about the new year. Not old. Yeah. You say that because it would mean you're old too. I know you aren't, so I guess I have to accept that. But yeah, I was looking up things on Scotland, which is one of the places that changed over from having March 25th as the new year. So, you know, Happy New Year in the Julian calendar. But I was looking up Scottish English because one of the future poems coming up, one of my tarot series, is given in the Scots dialect of English. It's my best attempt at the accent and even some of the language. It's a little bit of homage to Robert Burns, which I was sad to find his birthday is on January 25th, so I missed that. But let me bring it up later. But yeah, it combines Scottish English, the Tower of Babel, the Tower Tarot card, and the internet, which I view as our modern Tower of Babel, if we can keep it standing. All right, I think there's just a couple people still watching. I appreciate it, but I'm going to sign off now. And, for those that didn't know, I do try to save these recordings and post them up to my YouTube channel. So for those who missed, I always let them know. I appreciate if you can make it for the live. You know, it's a chance to get out to a few new people who might catch it that aren't already followers. But I'll always post the material on YouTube so long as the recording comes out correctly. I've had one where TikTok dropped the ball. But it's another way to share a lot of material at once. Anyway, thanks for coming by. Happy spring. Go out once it gets finally warm and bright and enjoy it. Notice it's dusk now. Between 7 and 8, the sunset. That was intentional. Have a good night.